For 7 years, I was the Griffin family's favorite punchline. They called me the charity case, smiling while they passed the mashed potatoes and reminded everyone how I fell apart in my 20s. I swallowed the humiliation because my grandmother, Lorraine, was the only one who didn't look at me with pity. But when she died, her will didn't just leave me money. It left me the receipt for every single lie they had ever told to keep me small. The roast beef at my Aunt Denise's dinner parties was always dry, but we all pretended it was succulent, just like we pretended I was lucky to be there. The dining room in Briar Glen was a shrine to upper-middle-class stability: beige walls, crown molding that cost more than my current car, and a chandelier that cast a fractured, crystalline light over the 12 of us squeezed around the mahogany table. It was the third Sunday of the month. Mandatory attendance. I sat between a neighbor I didn't know, a man named Ted who sold insurance, and my cousin Shelby, who was currently detailing her struggle to find a nanny who spoke the correct dialect of French. "Ariana, pass the potatoes," my mother called out from the other end of the table. Her voice had that specific pitch she used for company: bright, airy, and completely hollow. "Make sure you take enough for yourself. We know groceries have been tight this month." The conversation stopped. It wasn't a screeching halt, just a polite pause, the kind where everyone collectively decides to look at their plates while the target absorbs the blow. I kept my smile fixed, a muscle memory honed over 7 years of practice. "I am fine, Mom. Thank you." "Oh, don't be proud, honey," Aunt Denise chimed in, leaning forward. Her pearl necklace clicked against the edge of the table. "We were just saying how brave it is that you are still trying with that little freelance writing thing. Most people would have given up and moved home by now." "We are just happy to help," Uncle Philip added, pouring wine for Ted. "It takes a village, right?" Even for a 33-year-old. There it was, the rebranding. To the outside world, the Griffin family was a fortress of benevolence. They were the saints who had caught me when I fell, the safety net that kept their wayward niece from hitting the pavement. To them, I was the charity case. It was a role they had cast me in 7 years ago, and they directed every scene to ensure I never stepped out of character. I took a spoonful of potatoes. They were cold. 7 years ago. I had been a rising marketing strategist in Chicago. I had a loft apartment, a portfolio of high-end clients, and a life that belonged entirely to me. Then came the project that imploded, a merger deal where sensitive data leaked, and somehow, the digital trail led back to my terminal. I claimed I was hacked. I fought it. But the industry is small and vicious. I was fired, sued for breach of contract, and blacklisted before the ink was dry on my termination letter. I lost the apartment. I lost the savings fighting the lawsuit. And when I crawled back to Maryland, broken and bewildered, my family didn't ask what happened. They told me what happened. "You couldn't handle the pressure. Ariana, you always were fragile. You tried to fly too high." They paid the settlement. They signed the lease on my cramped studio apartment, and in exchange, they took my dignity as collateral. "So, tell us, Ariana," Ted the insurance man asked. Trying to be polite, "what is it you're working on now?" I cleared my throat, keeping my eyes on the centerpiece. "I am doing copy for a nonprofit vendor platform. It is technical writing." Uncle Philip chuckled. "It is data entry. Ted, she is doing data entry, but it keeps the lights on. Barely." A ripple of sympathetic laughter moved around the table. I felt the heat climb up my neck. I wasn't doing data entry. I was writing complex grant proposals and compliance manuals, but correcting them was useless. If I succeeded, I didn't need them, and they needed me to need them. I looked down the table to the head, where my grandmother, Lorraine, sat. She was 82, shrinking inside a navy blue blazer that used to fit her shoulders perfectly. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes, usually sharp as cut glass, looked tired. She wasn't eating. She was watching me. Lorraine was the matriarch, the source of the money that funded the crown molding and the dry roast beef. She was the only one who didn't participate in the sport of baiting me. "Eat your dinner." "Philip," Lorraine said. Her voice was thin. but it still carried the weight of the checkbook. Ariana is working hard. That is more than I can say for some people at this table who treat their inheritances like a debit card. The silence that followed was different. It was sharp. Uncle Philip cleared his throat and drank his wine too quickly. Aunt Denise suddenly found a fascination with the floral arrangement. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered. She didn't smile. She just gave a nearly imperceptible nod, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for her water glass. After dinner, the ritual of cleanup began. This was part of the price of admission. While Shelby and the other cousins sat in the living room discussing vacations I couldn't afford, I went to the kitchen to scrub pans. The kitchen was chaotic with the noise of the dishwasher and the clatter of china. I was deep in the suds of a roasting pan when I felt a presence at my elbow. It was Lorraine. She smelled of lavender soap and old paper. "Leave that," she said softly. "The maid comes tomorrow. I have to earn my keep. Grandma, you know the rules." Lorraine made a sound that was half scoff, half wheeze. She looked toward the doorway to ensure we were alone, then reached into the pocket of her blazer. She pulled out a small, cream-colored envelope. It wasn't sealed. "Take this," she said. Pressing it into my wet, soapy hand, I pulled back. "Grandma, no, I don't need cash. I'm okay. It is not cash. Ariana, I don't want it." I wiped my hands on a towel. Stepping away, I couldn't take another handout. Every check my mother wrote me came with a lecture. Every bill Uncle Philip paid came with a public announcement. Lorraine stepped closer, her eyes locking onto mine with a ferocity that startled me. "It is not pity, Ariana. It is proof." "Proof of what?" She hesitated, glancing at the door again. "For later. Hide it. Do not open it here. And for the love of God, do not let Denise see it." The urgency in her voice chilled me. I took the envelope. It was light, containing maybe a single sheet of paper. I slid it into the back pocket of my jeans just as Aunt Denise bustled into the kitchen carrying a tray of half-eaten dessert. "Oh, good. You are almost done," Denise said, not looking at us. "Lorraine, you should be sitting down. You know what the doctor said about your blood pressure." "I am fine." "Denise," Lorraine snapped, though she leaned heavily against the counter. Denise sighed, the sound of a martyr practiced in her art. "We just want what is best for you. Mother, we are handling everything so you don't have to worry. I even told the post office to route your mail to our house for a few weeks. You were getting overwhelmed with all those solicitations." I saw Lorraine's hand tighten on the granite countertop. Her knuckles turned white. "You redirected my mail?" "Just to sort it," Denise said breezily, picking up a sponge. "We don't want you falling for any scams. You know how confused you get in the afternoons." Lorraine looked at me. The look wasn't confusion. It was fear. Controlled, intelligent fear. I drove home that night in my 10-year-old sedan, the heater rattling against the October chill. The envelope in my pocket felt heavy, like a stone dragging me down. I tossed it onto my bedside table when I got into my apartment, too exhausted to deal with whatever new game Lorraine was playing. I assumed it was a check she had disguised, or maybe a sermon about finding a husband. I didn't open it. I couldn't bear to feel grateful for one more thing. 2 days later, I was sitting in a coffee shop, trying to steal their Wi-Fi because mine had been cut off. The data entry joke Uncle Philip had made wasn't far off the mark regarding the pay. But this new contract with Bright Harbor was supposed to be my ladder out of the hole. Bright Harbor was a massive vendor platform connecting nonprofits with suppliers. They needed a complete overhaul of their vetting documentation. It was dry, boring, and paid $4,000 upon completion. That money would pay off my credit card and get me 2 months ahead on rent. It was freedom money. I logged into their contractor portal, feeling a rare spark of optimism. I navigated to the About Us page to check the spelling of the CEO's name for the cover letter of the final deliverable. I scrolled down past the executive team. I scrolled past the directors. Then I hit the section titled Community Advisory Board. There, smiling out from a professional headshot that made him look 10 years younger, was Uncle Philip, Philip Griffin, Senior Advisor, Strategic Partnerships. My stomach dropped. The coffee turned to acid in my throat. I hadn't gotten this job because of my portfolio. I hadn't gotten it because my proposal was sharp or my rates were competitive. I had gotten it because Uncle Philip sat on the board. He knew. He had probably made the call to the hiring manager. Give my niece a shot. She's a bit of a charity case, but she needs the work. They were watching me. Even here, in the one thing I thought I had built for myself, I was under their microscope. If I missed a deadline, Philip would know. If my work was subpar, Philip would apologize for me. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the computer through the window. Instead, I packed up my bag and walked out, feeling the invisible leash tighten around my neck. I walked for an hour, just trying to burn off the adrenaline. When I finally pulled my phone out to check the time, I saw a notification from Instagram. Shelby Griffin tagged you in a post. My thumb hovered over the screen. Shelby never tagged me. Shelby posted photos of her vacations, her perfect children, and her Pilates progression. I was not part of the Shelby brand. I tapped the notification. It was a video reel. Music swelled, something acoustic and cloying. A guitar strumming a melody meant to induce tears. The text overlay read, "Family is about never giving up on the ones who fall." The first image was a photo of me from 7 years ago. Right after the firing, I looked gaunt, my hair unwashed, sitting on my parents' couch wrapped in a blanket. It was a photo taken at my absolute lowest point, a moment of private despair. I didn't even know it existed. The video cut to a photo of my dad moving boxes into my studio apartment. We picked them up. Then a shot of Aunt Denise handing me a plate of food at Thanksgiving. We feed their souls. Then, a video clip from the dinner 2 nights ago. It was taken from across the table. I was looking down at my plate, looking submissive and small, while Uncle Philip laughed beside me. We remind them they are loved, even when they are lost. The caption read, "So proud of my cousin Ariana for continuing her journey. It has been a hard 7 years, but with a family like ours, no one fights alone. Family First Mental Health Awareness Grateful." I stood on the sidewalk, pedestrians streaming past me, and felt like I had been slapped. She had used my trauma for likes. She had framed my humiliation as a heartwarming content pillar for her mommy blogger aesthetic. I dialed Shelby. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, cousin, did you see it? It is already blowing up. People are being so supportive. Take it down." I said. My voice was low, trembling. "What?" "Take it down." "Shelby, now. You do not have permission to post photos of me, especially not that one from the living room." "Ariana, don't be dramatic. I made you look sympathetic. You made me look like a broken pet you rescued from a shelter," I shouted, ignoring the stares of a woman walking a poodle. "I am trying to build a professional reputation. Shelby, how does it look to my clients if they search my name and find a video about how lost and fragile I am?" Shelby huffed. "Honestly, Ariana, you should be grateful. Most families would hide a mess like you. We embrace you. And frankly, the engagement on this post is bringing attention to Uncle Philip's charity work. So it is actually helping more people than just you. Stop being so selfish." She hung up. I stood there, staring at the black screen. Selfish. That was their favorite word. Any attempt to set a boundary was selfish. Any desire for privacy was ungrateful. I needed to talk to Lorraine. She was the only one who saw the strings. I drove to Hawthorne Court the next afternoon. It was a high-end retirement community, the kind with manicured lawns and nurses who wore pastel scrubs to look less clinical. Lorraine's cottage was at the end of a winding path lined with birch trees. When I arrived, the door was unlocked. "Grandma?" I called out. "I am in the sunroom." She answered. I found her sitting in her winged armchair, a blanket tucked around her knees despite the warm sunlight streaming through the glass. On the table in front of her were piles of paper, files, ledgers, old manila envelopes. She looked worse than she had at dinner. Her skin was gray, papery. "Ariana," she said, gesturing to the chair opposite her. "Sit. Close the door." I sat. "Grandma, are you okay?" Denise said you were doing better. Denise says a lot of things, Lorraine muttered. She picked up a sheet of paper, her hand shaking so badly the paper rattled. Did you bring the envelope I gave you? No. I left it at home. I haven't opened it. Good. Keep it closed. Not yet. She leaned forward. Her eyes were watery, but the gaze was iron. I had tea with Mrs. Calloway this morning. You remember her? Her son works at the bank. I nodded. She tells me that a woman claiming to be my niece called the branch 3 times last week, asking for copies of my statements from 7 years ago. Aunt Denise? I asked. Lorraine nodded grimly. She is looking for the trails. Ariana. She knows the timeline doesn't add up. She is trying to sanitize the history before I die. What history? Grandma? What are you talking about? What timeline? Lorraine closed her eyes for a moment, breathing shallowly. The year you lost your job. The year you broke down. I looked away. I hate talking about that year. It wasn't an accident. Ariana, she whispered. My head snapped back to her. What? You were good at your job. You were careful. You didn't leak that data. I know I didn't. I said, defensive, but no one believed me. The forensic audit proved it came from my login. Login credentials can be stolen, she said, especially if someone has access to your laptop when you visit home for Christmas, especially if someone wants you back in Maryland, under their thumb, where you can't ask questions about the family trust. The room went very quiet. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. What are you saying? I asked, my voice barely audible. I am saying that you were never the burden. Ariana, you were the shield. They needed you weak so they could feel strong, and they needed you distracted so you wouldn't see what they were doing with the orchard money. She started coughing, a wet rattling sound that scared me. I jumped up to get her water, but she waved me down. Sit, she wheezed. I don't have much time. The doctors are talking about hospice, but Denise won't tell you that. She wants to keep the image pretty until the end. Hospice? Tears pricked my eyes. Promise me something, Lorraine said, grabbing my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Anything. When the funeral happens, and it will be soon. Do not leave town, no matter how much they insult you, no matter how much they try to buy you a plane ticket to start fresh somewhere else. You stay. You stay for the reading of the will. I promise, I said. And that envelope I gave you? Inside is a key. Do not use it until I am gone, and do not let them know you have it. She released my wrist, sinking back into the chair, exhausted. Now go. Denise is coming by at 4 to organize my files. I need to hide these. I helped her stack the papers, my mind racing. Orchard money? The family trust? I knew we had a trust. It was what paid for the cousins' colleges and Aunt Denise's lifestyle, but I had always been told I was excluded from it because of the settlement they paid for my lawsuit. I left Hawthorne Court feeling like the ground was shifting under my feet, the narrative I had lived with for 7 years, that I was the screw-up, the black sheep, the charity case, had a crack in it. I drove home in a daze. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the highway. When I got to my apartment complex, I walked up the 3 flights of stairs, my keys jingling in my hand. I reached my door and stopped. There was a thick courier envelope taped to the wood. My name was on the front, typed, no return address. I ripped it off the door and unlocked my apartment, locking the deadbolt behind me instantly. I threw my bag on the couch and tore open the courier flap. Inside was a single, stiff document. It looked like a summary page from a legal filing. It was notarized. Summary of amendment to the Lorraine Griffin Living Trust. Dated August 14th, 7 years ago. I scanned the legalese, my eyes catching on phrases I didn't fully understand but instinctively feared. Revocation of prior beneficiaries. Reallocation of voting shares. And then, stuck to the bottom of the page, was a yellow sticky note. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakable. It was Lorraine's. Don't show them yet. They think this version was destroyed. I stood in the center of my cheap, drafty living room, holding the paper that proved my grandmother had been playing a long, dangerous game against her own children, and she had just tagged me in. For 7 years. I thought I was the victim of my own incompetence. But as I looked at the date on the document, August 14th, exactly 2 weeks before my career imploded, I realized Lorraine was right. I wasn't the charity case. I was the target. And now, I was the only one with the weapon. I folded the document, shoved it between the mattress and box spring of my bed, and sat in the dark, waiting for the phone to ring. I knew, with a sudden, icy certainty, that the next time it did, it would be to tell me she was gone, and then the war would begin. Lorraine Griffin died on a Tuesday morning, quietly and without the fanfare my family usually attached to everything. By Friday, the machinery of the Griffin family reputation management was operating at maximum capacity. The funeral was held at the Sterling Sons Funeral Home in Ashford Vale, a place that looked less like a house of mourning and more like a country club that happened to specialize in corpses. The carpets were plush enough to swallow the sound of stilettos, and the air smelled aggressively of lilies and furniture polish. I arrived early, driving my battered sedan to the far back of the lot, so it wouldn't ruin the aesthetic of the black Mercedes and BMWs lining the front row. I wore a simple black dress I had bought at a thrift store 3 years ago. It fit, but it lacked the sharp tailoring that signaled success in my family's language. Inside, the choreography had already begun. "Ariana, there you are," Aunt Denise whispered, appearing at my elbow before I could even take off my coat. She smelled of hairspray and nervous energy. Her eyes darted around the lobby, checking who had arrived. "We have saved a seat for you." "Third row. On the left? Third row?" I asked. "I'm the granddaughter." Denise smiled, a tight, pained expression. "We thought it would be better if the direct children and their spouses sat in the front 2 rows, for the procession flow. Plus, Shelby and Mark are reading the Psalms, so they need aisle access." I understood immediately. The front rows were for the winners. The front rows were for the Griffins who had not failed. I was being placed in the visual equivalent of the kids' table. "That is fine," I said, my voice flat. "Good." Denise smoothed a non-existent wrinkle on my shoulder. "And listen, honey, people might come up to you. They might ask how you're doing. Just keep it brief. You can just say you are getting by. We don't want to burden anyone with the details of your situation. Not today. My situation. 7 years of freelance work, a clean credit record, and a modest life. Yet they still spoke about me like I was in active rehabilitation." I walked into the chapel. The casket was closed, draped in a spray of white roses that probably cost more than my car. I stood before it for a moment, ignoring the heavy silence behind me. This was the woman who had slipped me an envelope while her hands were shaking. This was the only person who had looked at me and seen Ariana. Not the mistake. I didn't cry. I felt a cold, hard knot in my chest, a mixture of grief and a terrifying sense of exposure without her. I was alone in the lion's den. As the room filled, I took my assigned seat in the 3rd row. I watched the performance. Uncle Philip shook hands near the entrance, looking solemn and statesmanlike. My mother dabbed at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, accepting condolences with a tragic grace that suggested she was the primary victim of this death. I heard a woman behind me whisper to her husband, "That is the granddaughter, right? The one Lorraine was always worrying about?" "Yeah, sad story. Lorraine always had a soft spot for the broken ones." I stared straight ahead at the back of Shelby's head. Soft spot. That was the line. They had planted it. They had watered it, and now they were harvesting it. After the service, which was a masterclass in impersonal eulogies, focusing on Lorraine's generosity rather than her personality, the crowd began to shuffle toward the reception hall. I needed air. I needed to get away from the suffocating scent of lilies. I slipped down a side corridor that led toward the private family viewing rooms and the administrative offices. I was looking for a water fountain, but I found voices instead. They were coming from around the corner, hushed but sharp. I recognized the cadence immediately. It was my mother and Uncle Philip. "We need to get ahead of the paperwork." "Philip," my mother hissed. Lorraine was messy in her last few years. She was hoarding documents. I know, Philip replied. His voice was lower, authoritative. I already spoke to the executor's paralegal. We are framing it as a standard consolidation. We just need to make sure the executor understands the plan before they start digging into the minutiae. What about the house in Hawthorne Court? My mother asked. We list it immediately. Philip sounded impatient. The market is high. We liquidate the assets, put the proceeds into the main trust, and disperse from there. It is cleaner. We don't want anyone asking why she held on to that property title separately. They were talking about her life like it was a failing subsidiary they needed to strip for parts, make sure the executor understands the plan. It implied the plan existed before she was even cold. I stepped back, intending to retreat, but I bumped into someone. I spun around, heart hammering. Standing there was a woman I didn't recognize, though she looked vaguely familiar. She was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that was impeccably tailored, and she held a leather briefcase. She looked like she belonged in a courtroom, not a funeral home hallway. Ariana Griffin? She asked. Her voice was cool, professional, but not unkind. Yes, I am Marian Locke, she said. I was your grandmother's attorney for the last 20 years. The name clicked. Locke Fenner. It was the firm on the letterhead I had seen in the envelope. I didn't know she had a private attorney. I stammered. I thought Uncle Philip handled her legal affairs. Marian's expression didn't change, but her eyes tightened slightly at the corners. Your uncle handled the family business affairs. I handled Lorraine's personal estate. There is a significant difference. She glanced down the hallway where Philip and my mother were still murmuring, then stepped closer to me. Lowering her voice, I cannot speak long. This is neither the time nor the place, but your grandmother left very specific instructions regarding you. Regarding me? Marian nodded. Please do not leave town after the service. I know your family might encourage you to take a break or travel. Do not go. The reading of the will is in 4 days. You need to be there. Why? I asked, the words sticking in my throat. Because, Marian said, shifting her briefcase, Lorraine was very fond of you, and she was very lucid until the end. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. She gave me a curt nod and walked past me, heading straight toward the lobby, leaving me shivering in the hallway. She was very lucid. It was a warning. Marian knew the narrative Philip was spinning, that Lorraine was confused, messy, hoarding papers. Marian was telling me that was a lie. I rejoined the family in the reception room. The atmosphere had shifted from somber to social. People were drinking wine and eating small quiches. I was cornered near the buffet table by Uncle Philip and Aunt Denise. My mother was flanking them. It felt coordinated. Ariana, sweetheart. Denise cooed, handing me a glass of white wine I didn't ask for. We were just talking about you. About me? I took the glass but didn't drink. Yes. Philip placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. We know this is hard on you. Lorraine was, well, she was your safety net in many ways. We know you relied on her for a lot of the extras. I didn't rely on her for money. Uncle Philip, I paid my own rent. Philip waved his hand dismissively. Details. The point is, with her gone, we want to make sure you don't panic. We know your finances are fragile. My mother stepped in. We have put together a little package for you. A fresh start loan. Of sorts. She pulled a folded document from her purse. It wasn't an envelope. It was a single sheet of paper with a check clipped to it. I looked at the check. $20,000. It was more money than I had seen in one place in 7 years. What is this? I asked. It is to help you get settled, Philip said smoothly. Maybe move to a cheaper city? Somewhere with a lower cost of living than here. Start over properly. And the paper? I asked. Oh, just standard boilerplate, Philip said, his smile tight. Just acknowledging that you have received this sum for funeral reimbursements and miscellaneous expenses, and that you waive any further minor claims against the immediate estate so we can close the probate quickly. It saves everyone legal fees. I looked at the document. The text was dense, but the words waiver and beneficiary jumped out at me. They were buying me out. They were offering me $20,000 to sign away my rights to whatever was in the will before I even heard it. Marion Locke's voice echoed in my head. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. I can't sign this. I said. The smile on Denise's face didn't drop, but it froze. Why not? It is a gift. Ariana, we are trying to help you. I need to read it first, I said, and I am not moving. I live here. Philip's hand squeezed my shoulder hard enough to hurt. Don't be difficult. Ariana, not today. Your grandmother just died. This is generous. Most families wouldn't do this for someone who has caused them so much embarrassment. The mask slipped. Just for a second. I stepped back. Dislodging his hand, I am not signing it, and I don't need your money. My mother let out a sharp, exasperated sigh. See? This is exactly what I meant. You are being selfish. Ariana, we are grieving, and you are making this about your pride. I am not the one handing out contracts at a funeral. Mom, I said quietly. I turned and walked away. I could feel their eyes boring into my back. I could feel the heat of their anger. They weren't used to me saying no. They were used to the Ariana who apologized, the Ariana who was grateful for scraps. I left the reception without saying goodbye to anyone else. I drove straight to my apartment. My hands were shaking so bad I had to grip the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I felt sick. They were so organized. They had the check ready. They had the document printed. They must have drafted it the day she died. Inside my apartment, I went straight to the bedroom. I reached between the mattress and the box spring and pulled out the envelope Lorraine had given me in the kitchen. I sat on the edge of the bed and tore it open. A small silver key fell onto the quilt. It was stamped with a number, 402. There was a note. Written on personalized stationery, Crescent Ridge Savings, Box 402. The rent is paid for 10 years. You were never the problem. I'm sorry I waited. L. I stared at the key. It felt cold and heavy, like a bullet. I'm sorry I waited. Waited for what? To tell me? To save me? I looked at the clock. It was 2 p.m. The bank was open for another 3 hours. I didn't change out of my funeral dress. I put the key in my pocket, grabbed my ID, and walked back out to the car. Crescent Ridge Savings was an old bank in the center of town, the kind with marble floors and tellers behind high glass partitions. I walked in, feeling out of place in my black dress and thrift store coat. I approached the desk for safe deposit boxes. A young woman with bright red lipstick looked up. Can I help you? I have a key for box 402, I said. I believe I am an authorized signatory. My name is Ariana Griffin. The woman typed into her computer. Her eyebrows shot up. Oh, the Griffin box. Yes. Lorraine Griffin added you. Let me see. 7 years ago? 7 years ago. The same week my life fell apart. She had added me to the box before the scandal even broke. Yes, I said. I need to see your identification. I handed her my driver's license. She scrutinized it, then typed something else. Okay. Ms. Griffin, you are cleared. It is just... She hesitated, looking at a note on her screen. Just what? I asked, my pulse quickening. Well, it says here that another woman came in last week trying to access this box. Who? I demanded. She didn't have authorization, so we turned her away, the teller said. She claimed to be Lorraine's daughter. She was quite insistent. She said Lorraine had lost her key and sent her to drill the lock. Aunt Denise, or my mother, did she give a name? She said she was Denise Griffin. We told her that without the key or being on the signature card. We couldn't help her. She was very unhappy. I bet she was. Lorraine knew. She knew they would come for the box. That was why she gave me the key in secret. I would like to access the box now. Please, I said. The teller led me into the vault. It was a room of steel and silence. She used her master key. I used mine, and the long metal drawer slid out. I will give you some privacy, she said, pointing to a small viewing cubicle. I carried the box into the cubicle and set it on the table. My heart was thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. I opened the lid. I expected jewelry. I expected cash. Maybe gold coins. The kind of things old people hoard. Instead, the box was filled with paper. There were stacks of printed emails. There were photocopies of bank transfers. There were property deeds. And sitting on top were 2 black USB flash drives and a thick sealed envelope. Written on the front of the envelope in Lorraine's shaky script was, "Read after the will is spoken, not before." I touched the envelope. I wanted to rip it open right there. I wanted to know why she had let me suffer for 7 years if she had the power to stop it. But I remembered her face in the sunroom. Promise me. I respected her wishes. I put the envelope in my purse. Then I looked at the rest. I picked up a stack of emails. The top one was dated 7 years ago. The subject line was, R.E., the Ariana situation. It was from Uncle Philip to Aunt Denise. We need to make sure the severance package is tied to the NDA. If she talks, she loses the settlement. We can't have her asking about the audit trails. I felt the blood drain from my face. Audit trails. I grabbed the flash drives. These weren't sentimental keepsakes. This was evidence. Lorraine hadn't left me a fortune. She had left me a case file. I packed everything into my large tote bag. I didn't leave a scrap of paper in the box. If Denise had tried to drill the lock once, she would try again. I couldn't leave anything here. I walked out of the bank with the bag clutched tight to my side. I felt like I was carrying a bomb. I drove to a diner on the edge of town, away from the Briar Glen crowd. I called Tessa. Tessa Nolan had been my best friend since college. She was the only person who hadn't drifted away when I got blacklisted. She was a paralegal in D.C., cynical and brilliant. "I need you," I said when she picked up. "Where are you?" Her voice was sharp. She knew about the funeral. "I'm at the diner on Route 9. I found something, or rather, Lorraine gave me something. I will be there in 20 minutes. When Tessa arrived, I had spread a few of the non-sensitive documents on the sticky table. I told her everything. The hallway argument, the bribe, the bank, Denise trying to break into the box. Tessa listened, her eyes narrowing behind her glasses. She picked up the flash drive and turned it over in her hand. "Ariana," she said quietly, "this is dangerous. I know. They framed me. Tessa, I don't know how. But they did. If they did," Tessa said, leaning in, "then they did it to protect a lot of money. People kill for this kind of thing. Or at least, they ruin lives for it, which they already did to you." "What do I do?" I asked. "Do I confront them?" "No!" Tessa slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "Absolutely not. You do not say a word. You go to that wake tonight, and you play the part. You be the sad. Broken charity case. Why? Because information is leverage, but only if they don't know you have it. If they know you have this drive, they will file an injunction. They will claim Lorraine was incompetent. They will tie you up in court for 10 years until you run out of money." She was right. I had $20,000 of debt and a 10-year-old car. They had the best lawyers in Maryland. "You have to wait for the will," Tessa said. "See what cards Lorraine actually dealt you. Until then, you are a ghost. You observe, you record, but you do not engage." I nodded slowly. The anger was burning a hole in my stomach, but I tamped it down. I had to be colder than they were. I went to the post-funeral gathering at Aunt Denise's house that evening. It was a mandatory appearance. To skip it would be seen as unstable behavior. The house was full of people, the same people who had whispered at the funeral. I stood by the fireplace, holding a glass of water, watching them. My cousin Shelby was holding court in the center of the room. It was just so hard on her. Shelby was saying to a group of neighbors, "That year she fell apart. I mean, we all tried to help, but you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved." "I remember." A neighbor nodded sympathetically. "She wouldn't even come out of her room for Christmas, right?" Shelby nodded sadly. "Depression is a beast. We just prayed and paid the bills. That is all you can do." I listened to them rewrite history. I remembered that Christmas. I hadn't come out of my room because I was working 3 freelance jobs to pay back the loan Uncle Philip claimed I owed him for the legal fees. I wasn't depressed. I was exhausted. But the story was seamless. They all repeated it with the same inflection, the same pitying tone. It wasn't just gossip. It was a script. They had repeated it so many times over 7 years that I think some of them actually believed it. I saw Uncle Philip watching me from across the room. He raised his glass in a mock salute. He thought he had won. He thought I was standing there, cowed and defeated, thinking about the $20,000 he had offered. I didn't smile back. I just sipped my water and touched the side of my bag where the flash drive was hidden. I left as soon as politeness allowed, back at my apartment. The silence felt heavy. I locked the door, then wedged a chair under the handle. Paranoia was starting to set in. I sat at my small kitchen table and opened my laptop. I plugged in the first flash drive. A window popped up. It was organized into folders. Bank statements, 2018 to 2024, property deeds. Medical records. L. Griffin Ariana, timeline. I clicked on Ariana, timeline. It was a chronological list of documents, scanned PDFs. I opened the first one. It was a letter, dated 7 years ago. It was addressed to the HR director of the firm I had been fired from. Dear Mr. Henderson, please accept this letter as my formal resignation. Due to personal mental health struggles, I am unable to continue with my duties. I stopped reading. I couldn't breathe. I had never written a resignation letter. I had been fired. I had screamed and fought and demanded an investigation. I looked at the signature at the bottom. It was mine, or a perfect copy of it. I scrolled down. Attached to the letter was an email from Uncle Philip to the CEO of that company, Bob. Thanks for handling this quietly. The family appreciates you letting her resign rather than pressing charges. We will handle her care from here. She's in a bad way. They hadn't just capitalized on my failure. They had engineered the exit. They had made me look unstable to protect themselves from… what? I opened another file, a bank transfer, from Griffin Orchard Holdings to Henderson Consulting Group. Amount, $50,000, memo, consulting services. They had paid off my boss. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the tears running down my face. It wasn't just a frame job. It was a transaction. They had bought my destruction for $50,000. I looked at the timestamp on the file. It was created 2 days before I was fired. Lorraine had known. She had found it. I reached for the second flash drive, my hand trembling. If this was what they did to me 7 years ago, what were they planning to do now that Lorraine was gone? I wasn't the charity case. I was the collateral damage, and now I was the witness. I closed the laptop, but the image of my forged signature burned behind my eyelids. The grief for my grandmother was still there, but it was being overtaken by something hotter, something sharper. I wasn't going to sign their waiver. I wasn't going to take their $20,000. I was going to take everything. The offices of Lock Fenner were located in Caldwell Harbor, a district of glass and steel that smelled of salt water and old money. I arrived 30 minutes early, parking my car between a Porsche Cayenne and a vintage Jaguar. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. The dark circles under my eyes were darker than usual, and my thrift store blazer felt thin against the air conditioning that blasted through the building's lobby. But I had the flash drive in my purse, and I had the key. When I reached the conference room on the top floor, the Griffin family was already there. They had turned the waiting area into a cocktail party without the alcohol. Uncle Philip was standing by the window, checking his watch and laughing at something my cousin Shelby said. My mother was adjusting her pearls, looking somber but composed, the picture of a grieving daughter who was ready to inherit. Ariana. Philip called out when he saw me. He didn't come over. He just waved a hand. Glad you made it. We were worried the traffic from your side of town would hold you up. I ignored the dig. I am here. Uncle Philip? Good, he said, turning back to the window. Let us get this over with. I have a tea time at 3. They were so confident. They treated this meeting like a formality, a final administrative hurdle before the wire transfers hit their accounts. They had the paperwork ready. They had the narrative set. They had the charity case in the corner. ready to sign whatever waiver they put in front of her for a quick payout. Marion Locke entered the room precisely at 10 o'clock. She was flanked by 2 junior associates who carried stacks of thick cream-colored files. Marion didn't smile. She gestured to the long oval table. "Please, take a seat." The seating arrangement was telling. Philip, my mother, and Aunt Denise took the chairs closest to the head of the table. Shelby and the other cousins filled in the middle. They left the chair at the far end, near the door, for me. I sat down. I placed my hands on the table to stop them from shaking. Marion stood at the head of the table. She opened the leather binder in front of her. "We are here to read the last will and testament of Lorraine Elizabeth Griffin," she began. Her voice was clear, devoid of emotion. "I will skip the standard preambles regarding burial, which have already been executed, and move directly to the distribution of assets." Philip leaned back in his chair, looking bored. "We are all familiar with the general structure. Marion, the main trust, the residuals. If we could speed this up?" Marion looked at him over her reading glasses. The look was cold enough to freeze water. "Mr. Griffin, I assure you, you are not familiar with the structure of this will." Philip's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" "Lorraine executed a new will and a comprehensive trust amendment 6 months ago." Marion said, "She did so in this office, with 2 witnesses and a competency evaluation performed by an independent neurologist on the same day." The room went deadly silent. I saw my mother stiffen. "A new will?" Aunt Denise asked, her voice high. "She didn't tell us about a new will. She was under no obligation to do so." Marion said, she then looked down at the document. First, regarding the liquid assets currently held in the primary family accounts. She listed off amounts, significant amounts, but not the fortune I knew the family controlled. She distributed these to my mother, Philip, and Denise. It was generous, but not life-changing for them. They nodded along, looking relieved, but slightly impatient. Then Marion turned the page. "And now, regarding the controlling interest in Griffin Orchard Holdings, LLC." I frowned. I had never heard of Griffin Orchard Holdings. I knew about the orchards my grandfather had owned decades ago, but I thought they were sold off years ago to pay for the estate taxes. Philip sat up straighter. "The holding company? That is just a shell for the old land leases. It is part of the general estate. It is not a shell." Marion corrected him. "It is the parent entity for the commercial properties in downtown Baltimore, the logistics center in Dundalk, and the licensing rights for the family patents. It is the primary vehicle of the Griffin family wealth." She paused, letting the weight of that sink in. "Lorraine has bequeathed 80% of the voting shares of Griffin Orchard Holdings, along with the position of managing member, to her granddaughter, Ariana Griffin." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the room. I sat frozen. 80%? Controlling interest? Then the explosion happened. "That is impossible." Philip slammed his hand on the table, standing up. "That company manages everything. Lorraine knew I was supposed to take over the board. She promised me." She was confused. My mother cried out, grabbing Philip's arm. "Marion, you know she was slipping. She didn't know what she was signing. 80% to Ariana? Ariana can barely pay her rent. She is a charity case," Shelby shouted, forgetting to use her indoor voice. "She has no experience. She had a mental breakdown." Marion raised a hand. She didn't shout, but her authority cut through the noise like a blade. "Sit down," she ordered. Philip remained standing, his face red. "This is undue influence. She was obviously manipulated. We will contest this. We will have this thrown out in probate court before the week is out." Marion waited. She watched them scream and posture. She watched them reveal exactly who they were. Then, she spoke again. Lorraine anticipated this reaction. Marion said softly, which is why she included Article 7, the transparency condition. She tapped a finger on the document. "What is that?" Denise snapped. "The transparency condition states that if any beneficiary contests the validity of this will, or the competency of the testator, It triggers an automatic release of a prepared evidentiary packet to all parties, as well as to the court record. Evidentiary packet? Philip asked. He sank slowly back into his chair. Lorraine spent the last 7 years collecting documents, Marion said. She curated a very specific archive: emails, bank transfers, altered legal agreements, and recordings of private conversations, if you contest the will. Those documents become public record as part of the defense of her competency. She wanted to prove she knew exactly who you were when she cut you out. My mother went pale. Her hand went to her throat. Marion turned another page. Furthermore, Lorraine explicitly addressed the claims of Ariana's instability. Marion began to read from the document, her voice ringing in the silent room. I, Lorraine Griffin, reject the narrative that my granddaughter, Ariana, is incapable of managing her own affairs. Her financial dependence on this family was not a result of her failure, but of deliberate interference by her relatives to ensure she remained powerless. I have seen the proof that her career was sabotaged, her debts were manufactured, and her reputation was systematically destroyed to prevent her from asking questions about the trust management. I felt tears prick my eyes. She had put it in the will. She had made it a legal fact, deliberate interference. But we helped her, Shelby cried, though she sounded less sure now. We saved her. Marion ignored her. She signaled to the associates. Lorraine left a personal correspondence for each of you. The associates moved around the table, placing a thick, sealed envelope in front of each family member. My mother stared at the envelope with her name on it like it was a cobra. Uncle Philip looked at his as if he wanted to set it on fire. Open them, Marion said. It is not a request. I watched as my mother tore hers open with trembling fingers. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. She read it, and I saw the blood drain from her face completely. She dropped the paper on the table and covered her mouth. Philip opened his. He read 2 lines, then crumpled the paper in his fist, his jaw working furiously. Shelby opened hers, read it, and tried to let out a scoffing laugh. This is ridiculous, she said. This is just mean, but her voice cracked. She looked terrified. Then Marion walked to the end of the table. She stood in front of me. She didn't hand me a letter from the stack. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a different envelope. It was blue, the same stationery Lorraine used for her thank you notes. Lorraine wanted you to have this now, Marion said gently. I took it. My name was written on the front in that familiar shaky cursive. I opened it. My dearest Ariana, if you are reading this, the bomb has gone off. I am sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. I wanted to, so many times. But I knew that if I tipped my hand before I had the legal framework locked down, they would have destroyed you completely. They would have put me in a home and declared you incompetent. I had to play the confused old woman. I had to let them think they were winning so they would get sloppy. I watched them redirect my mail. I watched them forge your signature, and I saved every scrap of it. You are not the charity case. Ariana, you are the CEO. You are the only one in this family with the intelligence and the morality to run the holdings. They know it. That is why they fear you. Do not let them bully you. You hold the cards now. Love, Grandma. I lowered the letter. I looked up at the table. They were all looking at me. But the look had changed. It wasn't pity anymore. It was fear. Pure, unadulterated fear. Marion cleared her throat. There is one final asset to distribute. She looked at me. The residence at 44 Hawthorne Court, along with all contents and personal property, is bequeathed to Ariana Griffin. My mother made a small, strangled noise. That house was worth $2 million. It was the family jewel. However, Marion continued, there is a condition attached to the deed transfer. A condition? I asked. Yes, to take possession of the property and to activate the voting shares of the holding company. You must agree to host a family accounting meeting at the Hawthorne Court residence within 30 days of this reading. An accounting meeting? Philip asked. What does that mean? It means, Marion said, closing the binder, that every beneficiary named in this must attend. At this meeting, Ariana will have the right to ask questions regarding the family finances and history over the last 7 years. Attendance is mandatory. If any beneficiary refuses to attend or leaves early, their portion of the liquid cash inheritance is forfeited and reverts to the main trust. It was a trap, a beautiful, brilliant trap. Lorraine was forcing them to come to my house, her house, and answer for what they did, and if they didn't, they lost the only money she had left them. Marion looked at me. "Do you accept this condition, Ariana?" I looked at Uncle Philip, who was still clenching his crumpled letter. I looked at Shelby, who was frantically texting someone under the table. I looked at my mother, who wouldn't meet my eyes. "I accept." I said, "The meeting is adjourned." Marion said. The room erupted into chaos immediately, but it was a different kind of chaos. It was the chaos of negotiation. Philip was the first to move. He walked down the length of the table, his face transforming from rage to a strained, desperate geniality. "Ariana," he said, stopping a few feet from me, "look, this is a lot." Obviously, Lorraine was trying to make a point, but we don't need to let this ruin the family. I stood up. I clutched the blue envelope to my chest. "I think the family is already ruined." "Philip, no. No. Listen." He lowered his voice. "Running a holding company is complicated. It is dangerous work. You don't want that stress. You have your writing." I waited. "We can work something out," he said quickly. "We can buy you out. The shares. We will give you a fair price. Better than fair. $2 million. Cash. You can walk away. You can finally leave Briar Glen. Go to Paris. Go to New York. Be free. $2 million. It was a fortune. It was enough to disappear. But I remembered the flash drive in my purse. I remembered the forged resignation letter. I remembered the $50,000 they paid my boss to fire me. "It is not for sale." "Philip," I said. My mother pushed past him. "Ariana, please, you have to understand. We did what we did to protect you. You were spiraling." "I was spiraling because you pushed me." "Mom," I said, "I read the letter. Mom, the one Lorraine wrote. That is just her perspective." My mother pleaded. She was angry. She didn't understand the nuance. "Look, if we do this meeting, if we air all this dirty laundry, it will destroy your father's memory. It will destroy Shelby's reputation. Is that what you want? To be the person who tore the family apart? The guilt? The old weapon? It used to work so well." Lorraine didn't want conflict. Aunt Denise chimed in, wiping her eyes. "She loved us. She wouldn't want us fighting like this. We should just settle this privately. We can sign a new agreement. We can say there was a mistake. They were swarming me. Their voices were overlapping. A cacophony of bribes and threats and emotional blackmail. Take the money. Think of the family. Don't be vindictive. Start fresh." I looked at Marion Locke. She was standing by the door, watching me. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "I am not signing anything," I said, my voice rising above theirs, "and I am not selling the shares. The meeting is in 30 days. I will send out the calendar invites." I pushed past Philip. I pushed past Shelby. I walked toward the door. "Ariana!" my mother called after me. "You can't do this. You don't know what you are starting." I kept walking. I walked out of the conference room, down the hallway, and toward the elevators. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I had done it. I had said no. I pressed the button for the lobby. Just as the elevator doors were sliding open, a hand slammed against the metal. Stopping them, it was Aunt Denise. She wasn't crying anymore. Her face was dry and hard, like cracked clay. She stepped into the elevator with me and let the doors close. We were alone. "You think you have won," she said softly. Her voice was low, devoid of the bubbly aunt persona she wore like a costume. "You think because the old lady gave you a pile of paper, you are in charge? I own 80% of the company." "Denise," I said. "Paper," she spat. "It is just paper." You don't know how this town works. You don't know who we know. You don't know what we can do to a single woman living alone in a big house. Are you threatening me? I am warning you." She stepped closer. Her perfume was overpowering. "You have been the charity case for 7 years. It is safe there. People pity you. But if you try to be the boss, if you try to expose us—" She leaned in until her lips were inches from my ear. "If you play this wrong, you will learn what it means to be truly alone. Not just ignored at dinner, but erased. We will make you wish you had taken the $20,000. The elevator chimed. We had reached the lobby. Denise pulled back, smoothed her blazer, and gave me a dazzling, terrifying smile. "See you at the meeting, sweetie." She walked out, her heels clicking on the marble floor. I stood in the elevator for a moment, the doors trying to close on me again. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Lorraine had warned me. The bomb has gone off. Denise was right about one thing. I didn't know how the town worked. I didn't know their connections, but I knew something they didn't. I reached into my bag and touched the flash drive. They thought I was playing defense. They thought I was just trying to survive. They didn't realize that for 7 years. I had been learning how to be invisible, and now I was going to use it. I walked out to my car. The sun was shining, bright and harsh. I unlocked the door and sat in the driver's seat. I looked at the blue envelope in my lap. "You are the CEO." I started the engine. I wasn't going back to my cramped apartment. I was going to Hawthorne Court. I was going to change the locks. And then, I was going to start preparing for the meeting. 30 days. I put the car in gear. The charity case was dead. The executor had arrived, 2 days after the reading of the will. I sat across from Marion Locke in her office, staring at a spreadsheet that dismantled my entire understanding of poverty. When Uncle Philip spoke about Griffin Orchard Holdings, he always used a tone of dismissive boredom, as if it were a dusty administrative burden he carried for the sake of history. He called it the shell. He complained about the filing fees. He sighed about the property taxes on useless dirt. I looked at the bottom line of the profit and loss statement Marion had just slid across the mahogany desk. $1.2 million. That was the net operating income for the last fiscal year. "This isn't a shell," I whispered. My voice sounded thin in the quiet office. "No," Marion said, taking a sip of her tea. "It is a fortress." She stood up and walked to a map on the wall, tapping a few locations. Griffin Orchard Holdings owns 3 commercial warehouses in the logistics district near the port. They have been leased to a national shipping logistics firm for the last decade. The rent increases by 4% annually. It also owns the land under that strip mall on Route 40, the one with the Starbucks and the urgent care center. And, of course, it holds the licensing rights to your grandfather's patent for the irrigation nozzle design, which still pays out quarterly royalties. I felt a wave of nausea. For 7 years, I had lived in a studio apartment with a radiator that hissed and rattled all night. I had budgeted $30 a week for groceries. I had skipped dentist appointments because I couldn't afford the copay. And every time I needed help, when my car broke down, when I needed a winter coat, I had to go to Uncle Philip. I had to sit in his study, head bowed, while he lectured me about fiscal responsibility. He would sigh, open his checkbook, and write me a check for $200, acting like he was taking food out of his own children's mouths. "Where did the money go?" I asked. "If the company makes over $1 million a year, where is it?" Marion sat back down and opened a second folder. "Salaries, mostly, and consulting fees. Your Uncle Philip draws a salary of $250,000 a year as the executive director of the holding company. Your Aunt Denise is paid $100,000 a year as a property liaison. Your mother receives a stipend for board service. They were draining it. They were treating the family inheritance like a private payroll, paying themselves massive salaries for doing absolutely nothing, while telling me the family was cash poor and that I was a burden for needing rent assistance. But here's the part that concerns you." Marion said. She pointed to a line item on the expense report, charitable outreach/family assistance. I looked at the number. $40,000. Is that me?" I asked. Marion nodded. According to the company books, Griffin Orchard Holdings spent $40,000 last year supporting distressed family beneficiaries. That is you, Ariana. I did not receive $40,000. I almost shouted. I got maybe $6,000? My rent was $500 a month, and Philip paid it directly to the landlord. Marion's eyes were hard. Exactly. The company paid $40,000. You received $6,000. The difference was likely absorbed by administrative costs or paid out to other vendors controlled by your uncle. They used your poverty as a line item to siphon more money out of the company tax-free. I sat back, the leather chair squeaking. I felt foolish. I felt used, but mostly, I felt a cold, sharp rage taking root in my chest. I wasn't just the scapegoat, I was the tax write-off. I left Marion's office with a heavy box of financial records and drove straight to Hawthorne Court. The house was exactly as Lorraine had left it. The air still smelled of lavender and dust. I walked through the silent rooms, running my hand along the back of the velvet sofa. This was my house now, but it didn't feel like a home. It felt like a command center. I set up a workspace in the dining room. I took the flash drives I had retrieved from the bank and the new files from Marion, and I started to build the timeline Lorraine had asked for. It was grueling work. Every document was a fresh cut. I found a folder on the flash drive titled Interference. Inside, there was a scanned copy of a letter from a marketing firm in Chicago. It was dated 4 years ago. I remembered that time. I had applied for a junior copywriter position. I had crushed the interview. The creative director had practically hired me on the spot. Then, 3 days later, he had ghosted me. I never heard from him again. The letter in the file was addressed to Uncle Philip. Dear Mr. Griffin, thank you for your candid conversation regarding Ariana's application. Based on the medical history and stability concerns you shared, we agree that a high-stress agency environment would not be a safe fit for her at this time. We have rescinded the offer. We appreciate you looking out for her well-being. I put my head in my hands. I hadn't failed. I hadn't been unqualified. Philip had called them. He had poisoned the well. He had told them I was crazy to keep me unemployed, to keep me in Briar Glen, to keep me needing him. I forced myself to keep reading. I found the debt ledger. It was a handwritten log Philip kept. January, Ariana car repair, $400. March, Ariana dental bill, $150. April, Ariana grocery card, $100. Next to each entry, he had written notes in red ink, unfocused, ungrateful, crying again. He was documenting my humiliation. He was building a case file of my inadequacy, dollar by dollar. But then I found something that made me stop breathing. It was a document labeled Family Support Repayment Agreement. I knew this document. I had signed it 7 years ago. Sitting at my parents' kitchen table, my eyes swollen from crying, they told me it was a formality, a way to show I was committed to getting better. It stated that I acknowledged the financial support was a loan, to be repaid when I was mentally fit. But the version in the file wasn't the one I signed. It was an earlier draft. The date on the metadata was from 12 years ago, and the name at the top wasn't Ariana Griffin, it was Shelby Griffin. I stared at the screen. 12 years ago, Shelby would have been a sophomore in college. I scrolled down. The terms were different. DUI legal defense, restitution for property damage. Shelby had gotten a DUI in college, a bad one. I vaguely remembered hearing rumors about a crash, about a parked car being totaled, but it had been hushed up instantly. Shelby is studying abroad for a semester, they had said. Uncle Philip had drafted this agreement for his own daughter. He had bailed her out, covered up the crime, and created a repayment structure to teach her a lesson. But he had never used it. Instead, 5 years later, when I was the one in trouble, not for a crime, but for a career collapse I didn't cause, he had dug up this old file, done a find and replace on the name, and forced me to sign it. He used the instrument of his daughter's actual guilt to punish me for my manufactured failure. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the overgrown rose garden, the shame I had carried for 7 years, the heavy, suffocating blanket of being the screw-up began to disintegrate. It wasn't mine. None of it was mine. I wasn't the one with the criminal record. I wasn't the one embezzling from the family company. I wasn't the one sabotaging relatives. I was the only decent person in the damn family. And they hated me for it. The grief hit me then. Harder than the anger. I mourned the 33-year-old woman I should have been, the career I should have had, the apartment in Chicago, the friends I had lost because I was too ashamed to call them back. They had stolen my 20s. They had eaten 7 years of my life to feed their own egos and bank accounts. I wiped my face. I couldn't get the years back, but I could make sure they paid for them. I needed help. Marion was a lawyer, but I needed someone who could follow the money through the maze Philip had built. I opened my laptop and searched for a name Marion had whispered to me as I left her office. Redwood Ledger Group. I dialed the number. A man answered on the second ring. Devon Shea. Mr. Shea, I said, keeping my voice steady. My name is Ariana Griffin. Marion Locke referred me. I have 80% control of a holding company that I believe has been used as a personal piggy bank by the minority shareholders for a decade. I can help with that, Devon said. His voice was dry, gravelly. I have a specific constraint. I said, I have a meeting in 30 days. I need a full forensic accounting of every dollar that flowed between Griffin Orchard Holdings and any account associated with Philip, Denise, or Shelby Griffin, and specifically, I need to trace every transaction labeled Ariana Assistance. I will need access to the books. Devon said, I am the managing member. I said, I have the login credentials. Send them over. Devon said, I charge $200 an hour. I'll pay you double if you can finish before the 30th. I said, I didn't have the money yet, but I knew where to find it. The next few days were a blur of scanning and organizing. I barely slept. I lived on coffee and the adrenaline of discovery. Then the phone calls started. It began with Mrs. Gable, the choir director at the church my grandmother had attended for 40 years. Ariana, dear, she said, her voice dripping with poisonous sweetness. I ran into your mother at the market today. She looked absolutely devastated. I am sorry to hear that. Mrs. Gable. She mentioned there is some unpleasantness regarding the will. Now, I know you are hurting. Dear, we all miss Lorraine. But your mother has done so much for you. The Bible tells us to honor our parents. The family had activated the network. They were weaponizing the community. I got a text from a neighbor I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Thinking of you. Hope you don't let greed cloud your judgment. Family is everything. I got a LinkedIn message from an old family friend who was a partner at a local law firm. Ariana, just a friendly word of advice. Litigation within families is a stain that never washes out. Settle. They were trying to suffocate me with social pressure. They wanted me to feel like a pariah, like the ungrateful wretch they had painted me to be. I didn't reply to any of them. I just took screenshots, evidence, one night, while I was cross-referencing the charity line items. I found a payment that didn't make sense. Recipient: Briar Glen Community Foundation. Memo: Family Resilience Grant. Sponsorship. Amount: $10,000. I clicked on the transaction details. It was dated 2 years ago. I searched online for Briar Glen Community Foundation Resilience Grant. The first result was a local news article. The headline made my blood run cold. Shelby Griffin wins Community Pillar Award for Resilience Initiative. I opened the article. There was a photo of Shelby, holding a giant check and smiling that perfect practice smile. The article read, Shelby Griffin was inspired to start the initiative after helping her own cousin navigate a severe mental health crisis. It was hard watching someone you love hit rock bottom, Shelby said in her acceptance speech, but it taught me that true strength is carrying those who cannot walk themselves. She had won an award for helping me. She had taken the darkest period of my life, dressed it up in inspirational language, and used it to win a trophy and a $10,000 grant. And the sponsorship money for the award? The money that funded the grant she won? It came from Griffin Orchard Holdings. The company, my company, had paid the foundation $10,000 to sponsor the award that Shelby then won. It was a circle, a money-laundering circle of vanity. And what did Shelby do with the grant money? I sent a text to Devin. Check Shelby's personal accounts for a deposit of $10,000 from the Community Foundation 2 years ago. Tell me where it went. 3 hours later, Devin replied. Deposit confirmed. 2 days later, a debit of $9,800 to Paradisescapes LLC. I looked up Paradisescapes. It was a luxury landscaping company. She had used the Resilience Grant, money awarded for her supposed saintly patience with my mental illness, to put in a new patio. I sat in the dark dining room, the light of the laptop screen casting long shadows on the walls. I looked at the timeline I was building on the wall, post-it notes, printouts, strings connecting names and dates. It looked like the wall of a detective hunting a serial killer. In a way, they had killed who I was. But as I looked at the web of lies, a cold knot of doubt formed in my stomach. If I released this, if I really put this all out there, I would destroy them. Uncle Philip could go to jail for fraud. Shelby would be a social pariah. My mother would be humiliated beyond recovery. Did I want that? I remembered the dinner parties. I remembered the way they smiled while they insulted me. I remembered the way my mother looked at me when I asked for help, like I was a stain on her perfect life. I didn't want to destroy them. I just wanted them to stop. I wanted them to admit it, but they wouldn't admit it, not unless I forced them. The phone rang. It was late, past 11. I looked at the caller ID. Devin Shea. I picked up. You're working late. I found something. Devin said. His voice was different, tenser. What is it? Did you find the patio money? I found that hours ago. This is bigger. Ariana. Are you sitting down? I am. Did you open a line of credit with American Express 5 years ago, a platinum business card? No. I said, I couldn't get a credit card 5 years ago. My credit score was barely 500 because of the medical bills. Devin was silent for a moment. I hear typing in the background. Well, someone opened one in your name, using your social security number. The mailing address was a P.O. box in Ashford Vale. Okay, identity theft. Add it to the list. It is not just theft. Ariana. The card was maxed out. $50,000 in 6 months. On what? Luxury goods? Travel? A lot of charges at a casino in Atlantic City? Uncle Philip loved blackjack. But here is the kicker. Devin said, the card wasn't sent to collections. It was paid off. By who? By Griffin Orchard Holdings. I frowned. Why would they pay off a card in my name? Because of how they coded the payment. Devin said, they listed it in the company ledger as reimbursement for unauthorized beneficiary spending. I didn't understand. What does that mean? It means, Devin said slowly, that they created a paper trail that makes it look like you stole the money. They opened the card, spent the money, and then used the company funds to pay it off while labeling it as theft by you. I felt the room spin. Why? I whispered. Leverage, Devin said. If you ever tried to sue them, or if you ever tried to claim your shares, they have a documented history of you embezzling $50,000 from the company 5 years ago. They could have you arrested. Ariana, it is a loaded gun, and it has been pointing at your head for 5 years. I dropped the phone onto the table. I stared at the wall of evidence. I had been worried about humiliating them. I had been worried about being too harsh. Meanwhile, they had framed me for a felony. They weren't just my family. They were my predators. I picked up the phone again. Devin? I am here. Keep digging. I said, my voice turning to ice. I want everything. Go back 10 years. Check every receipt. Check every signature. I am on it. I hung up. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark driveway. I imagined Aunt Denise's face in the elevator. You will learn what it means to be truly alone. She was wrong. I wasn't alone. I had Lorraine's files. I had Devin. And I had the truth. I wasn't going to cancel the meeting. I wasn't going to settle. I was going to wait for the 30th day. I was going to let them come into my house, drink my coffee, and sit at my table. And then I was going to detonate the bomb. The 30th day arrived, with a gray, persistent rain that battered the windows of Hawthorne Court. I had spent the morning moving the furniture in the dining room. I took away the comfortable upholstered chairs and replaced them with stiff, high-backed wooden ones I found in the attic. I removed the decorative centerpiece. I placed a single pitcher of water and 6 glasses on the polished mahogany. This wasn't a family gathering. It was a deposition. Devon Shea arrived at 9 o'clock. He was younger than he sounded on the phone. Maybe 40, with the sharp, unblinking stare of a man who found numbers more honest than people. He set up his laptop and a portable printer at the end of the table. Marion Locke was dialed in on the conference speakerphone sitting in the center of the table. "We are ready," Marion's voice crackled. "Remember, Ariana, you control the room." The doorbell rang at 10. They arrived together, a united front in beige trench coats and umbrellas. Uncle Philip led the way. Looking like a man arriving for a root canal he intended to sue the dentist for. My mother, Ellen, followed, clutching her purse with white-knuckled intensity. Aunt Denise and Shelby brought up the rear, looking around the foyer with critical eyes, as if assessing what they would change once they inevitably wrestled the house back from me. "Welcome," I said. I stood by the dining room door holding a woven basket. "Phone's in here. Please." "What?" Shelby scoffed. "I'm not giving you my phone. I have kids. Phone's in the basket, or you are marked as absent." I said calmly, "And if you are absent, you forfeit your inheritance. It is in the will." Shelby looked at Philip. His jaw clenched, but he pulled his phone from his pocket and dropped it into the basket. It landed with a heavy thud. The others followed. I led them into the dining room. "Sit anywhere," I said. They took their seats. The silence was heavy, filled only with the hum of Devon's laptop and the sound of rain. "Who is this?" Philip asked, gesturing a thumb at Devon. "This is Devon Shea," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. "He is a forensic accountant with the Redwood Ledger Group. He is here to record the minutes and present the financial findings. Marion Locke is on the speaker." Philip let out a sharp, derisive laugh. "A forensic accountant? Really? Ariana? Isn't this a bit dramatic? We are family, not the mafia." I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just opened the blue folder in front of me. Lorraine wrote in her will that my dependence was manufactured. I said, "I want to start by reading a sentence from her final letter to me. I watched them redirect my mail. I watched them forge your signature, and I saved every scrap of it." My mother flinched. Denise looked at the ceiling. "We are here to clear the ledger." I continued, "If we can get through this agenda honestly, we can discuss the settlement of the estate. If we cannot, I trigger the transparency condition." Philip leaned back, crossing his arms. "Fine. Let us play your game. What is on the agenda?" "Item 1, I said. "The support agreement." I signaled Devon. He slid a piece of paper to Philip and one to Shelby. "This is the document I signed 7 years ago." I said, "The one where I acknowledged a loan of $50,000 for legal fees and restitution." Philip nodded. "Yes, we paid a fortune to keep you out of court when you had your episode." I looked at Shelby. She was staring at the paper, her face draining of color. "Shelby," I said, "do you recognize the case number at the top of that document?" She didn't answer. She was breathing fast. "I do," I said. I looked it up. "It is a case number from 12 years ago, a DUI in Ann Arbor, Michigan, involving a 2014 Jeep Cherokee." The room went dead silent. "That was your car." "Shelby," I said, "and that was your DUI." Shelby looked up, tears instantly welling in her eyes. "It was a mistake. I was 20. It was a mistake." I agreed. "But 7 years ago, Uncle Philip took the contract he drafted for you, the one you never signed, and he changed the name to Ariana Griffin. He made me sign a confession for money I never received, to cover a crime I never committed, just so he could hold a $50,000 debt over my head." Philip slammed his hand on the table. "We used that structure to protect you. You needed structure. You needed to feel the weight of consequence so you wouldn't drift. So you gaslit me?" I asked. My voice remained level. "You made me believe I owed the family $50,000. I worked 3 jobs to pay you back. Where did that money go? Philip? It went into the family pot. He shouted, to pay for your rent. Devin cleared his throat. Actually, Devin said, his voice dry and precise, we traced the payments Ariana made. They were deposited into a personal account held by Philip Griffin. From there, they were transferred to a generic holding account. They were never used for rent. Griffin Orchard Holdings paid Ariana's rent directly. So I paid you, and the company paid my rent. I summarized, you got paid twice, once by me, and once by the company you manage. Philip's face turned a mottled purple. This is cherry picking. You don't understand corporate accounting. I understand theft. I said, I moved the next paper forward. Item 2, the debt ledger. I held up the handwritten log. You wrote here that you gave me $400 for car repairs in January of 3 years ago. I said, Philip sneered, I did. Your transmission blew. Devin spoke up. The bank records show a withdrawal of $400 from the company account on that date. However, the mechanic's invoice was only $212, and it was paid by credit card. The cash withdrawal was pocketed. It is a handling fee, Philip sputtered. For my time. I had to drive down there. 100% markup for driving 5 miles? I asked. I went through the list. The dental bill, the grocery cards. Every time they had claimed to save me, they had actually inflated the cost. Billed the company for the higher amount, paid the actual bill, and kept the difference. They were scalping my poverty. My mother started to cry. It was a soft, weeping sound that usually made me rush to comfort her. Ariana, please, she sobbed. Why are you doing this? We loved you. We just wanted you to be safe. I looked at her. I felt the old pull, the instinct to apologize, to fix it. But then I looked at the next document in my stack. I am doing this, Mom, because of this. I slid the credit card statement across the table to her. American Express Platinum, I said, opened 5 years ago, maxed out at $50,000. She looked at it, wiping her eyes with a tissue. I don't know what this is. Devin, I said, the card was opened using Ariana's social security number. Devin said, the application was mailed to a P.O. box in Ashford Vale. The IP address used to complete the online application matches the IP address of the Griffin family home residence. So? Denise snapped. Anyone could have used the Wi-Fi. Devin continued. The recovery email address for the account is egriffin82gmail.com. The room stopped breathing. Griffin, Ellen Griffin, my mother. I looked at her. She wasn't crying anymore. She was staring at the table, her face completely still. You? I whispered. I thought it was Philip. I thought Philip was the one who needed the casino money. Philip looked at my mother, genuinely shocked. Ellen? You opened that card? My mother slowly raised her head. Her eyes were dry. I needed the liquidity, she said. Her voice was steady, almost bored. Lorraine was tightening the purse strings. She was checking the main accounts too closely. I needed a line of credit that wouldn't show up on the family books. So you stole my identity? I asked. You weren't using it, she said. She shrugged. A tiny, elegant movement. Your credit was already ruined from the hospital bills. It didn't matter to you, and I paid it off. You paid it off with company money. I said, and you labeled it unauthorized beneficiary spending. You framed me for embezzlement. It was a safety measure, she said, in case you ever got difficult, like you are being now. I looked at the woman who had raised me, the woman who had sat on my bed when I was depressed and told me she would always take care of me. She wasn't the weak, grieving widow she pretended to be. She wasn't the peacemaker. Philip was just a bully. Denise was just greedy. But my mother? She was the architect. She was the one who had redirected the mail so I wouldn't see the statements. She was the one who had kept the charity case narrative alive, because as long as I was the disaster. No one looked at her spending. Why? I asked. She looked at me with a chilling emptiness. Because I deserved it. Ariana, I spent 30 years taking care of your father. Then taking care of Lorraine. I deserved a life. And you? You were young. You could bounce back. I felt a coldness settle over me that was permanent. Lorraine knew, didn't she? I asked. My mother's lips thinned. Lorraine suspected. That is why she didn't fight you 7 years ago. I realized. I looked at the timeline on my notepad. Lorraine found out about the credit card. She threatened to expose you, and you threatened her back. My mother didn't answer. You threatened to put her under guardianship. I said, you told her that if she spoke up, you would tell the court she was senile. You would use her confusion, which you probably exaggerated, to take control of the estate and lock her away. My mother smoothed the tablecloth. It would have been for her own good. She was getting paranoid. She was getting paranoid because you were robbing her, I shouted. It was the first time I raised my voice. The echo of my shout bounced off the walls. Devin cleared his throat again. He looked uncomfortable. We have traced approximately $400,000. Devin said, money moved from Griffin Orchard Holdings into personal accounts controlled by Ellen and Philip Griffin, ostensibly for Ariana's care, but ultimately used for personal lifestyle expenses, debt servicing, and in one case, a boat purchase. Philip looked down at his hands. I sat back. The anger had burned itself out, leaving only clarity. I have a proposal. I said. Philip looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. A settlement? He asked. A surrender. I corrected. I pulled a document from my folder. Marion had drafted it that morning. You will repay every cent of the $400,000 to Griffin Orchard Holdings. I said, you will liquidate assets if you have to. You will sell the boat. Philip, you will sell the patio. Shelby. That is impossible, Shelby cried. Second, I continued, you will sign a notarized admission of guilt regarding the identity theft and the falsified support agreement. This admission will be held in escrow by Marion Locke. If you ever contact me, or slander me, or try to contest the will, it goes to the district attorney. And third, my mother asked, third, you will resign from all community boards where you used my name to gain sympathy or status. You will write letters of correction to the organizations, and you will never speak my name in public again. And if we refuse? Philip asked. He was trying to muster some bluster, but it was weak. If you refuse, I said, I trigger the transparency condition. I release the full packet to the IRS. I release it to the other shareholders. I release it to the police. I leaned forward. And Mom, I will press charges for the credit card fraud. The statute of limitations hasn't run out because you concealed the crime. My mother looked at me. For the first time, I saw fear behind the mask. Real fear. I can't go to jail, she whispered. Then sign the paper. I said. The room fractured. It wasn't a clean break. It was a crumbling. Philip turned on my mother. You told me the credit card was a misunderstanding. You told me Ariana authorized it. You were happy enough to spend the cash at the casino, she snapped back. I didn't know it was stolen, Philip shouted. I thought it was part of the trust distribution. You are an idiot. Philip, Denise screamed. You signed the checks. You are the executive director. It is not my fault. Shelby was sobbing again. I just did what you guys told me. You said Ariana was sick. You said we had to manage her money. I sat and watched them. This was the perfect family. This was the unit that had judged me for 7 years. They were a nest of vipers biting each other's tails. I stood up. You have 1 hour to decide. I said, Devin and I will be in the kitchen. If the document isn't signed by noon, I make the call. I walked out. Devin followed me, carrying his laptop. We went to the kitchen. I leaned against the granite counter, my legs suddenly shaking. You did good, Devin said quietly. I feel sick. I said, that is normal. It is the adrenaline dump. I drank a glass of water, listening to the muffled shouting coming from the dining room. It sounded like a pack of dogs fighting over a bone. 40 minutes later, the door opened. Philip walked in. He looked 10 years older. He was holding the document. We signed, he said. His voice was hoarse. He placed the paper on the island. But there is a condition. He said, I don't do conditions. Philip, just one. A private one. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a check. It was a cashier's check. For $2 million. We pooled our liquid assets. He said, "This is everything we have right now. Take it. Sell us the shares. Walk away. You have your vindication. You have your apology. But don't make us pay back the $400,000 to the company. Just take this buyout and leave us the company." I looked at the check. $2 million. It was the same trap. Always the same trap. Take the money and go away. Let us keep the control. If I took it, they would win. They would rewrite the history again. They would say I settled. They would say I was just after the cash all along. And they would keep the company. They would keep draining it. I picked up the check. Philip held his breath. I ripped it in half. "I don't want your money." "Philip," I said, "I want the company. And I want the repayment." Philip's face crumbled. "You are destroying us." "No," I said, "I am just balancing the books." He stared at me with pure hatred. Then he turned and walked out. I heard the front door slam, then the car engine starting. They were gone. I walked back into the dining room. It was empty. The chairs were pushed back in disarray. The air felt heavy, used. I looked at the table. The signed agreement was there. They had capitulated. Devin was packing up his printer. "Well," Devin said, "that was intense." I walked over to the stack of files Devin had organized on the sideboard. I wanted to put the credit card statement, the smoking gun, back in the safe. I flipped through the stack. The Ariana timeline folder was there. The bank transfers were there. But the folder labeled American Express, fraud evidence, was gone. My stomach dropped. "Devin," I said sharp, "did you pack the Amex file?" "No," Devin said, looking up. It was right there on top of the stack. I looked around the room. It wasn't on the floor. It wasn't on the table. Someone had taken it. They had signed the confession, sure, but that was a piece of paper I held. The evidence, the original application with the IP address, the physical proof of the crime, was gone. Without that file, the confession was just a piece of paper they could claim they signed under duress. I ran to the window. I saw the taillights of my mother's Mercedes disappearing down the long driveway. She hadn't just signed. She had stolen the leverage. She wasn't defeated. She was regrouping. I grabbed my phone. "Marion, are you still there?" "Yes," Marion said. "File the agreement immediately." I said, "Scan it. Lock it down." "Why? What happened?" "They stole the evidence file," I said, watching the rain blur the world outside. "The war isn't over." I turned back to the empty room. They thought stealing the file would save them. They thought they could erase the crime. But they forgot one thing. I didn't just have the file. I had the backups. And now, I had no reason to show mercy. The folder was gone, but the data was immortal. My mother had stolen the physical printout of the American Express application, thinking she had snatched the smoking gun right off the table. She drove away believing she had bought herself an acquittal. She was wrong. I stood at the window of the dining room, watching the rain carve rivulets into the glass. Behind me, the hum of the portable printer started up again. Devin Shea was already reprinting the file from the cloud backup. "They don't understand how digital forensics works," Devin said, his voice flat. He didn't look up from his laptop. "They think if they shred the paper, the transaction disappears. But the bank servers have a memory that never forgets." I turned around. "Get everything. Devin, not just the credit card. I want the metadata on the forged resignation letter. I want the IP logs from the bank transfers. I want it all packaged and encrypted." I picked up the phone. "Marion, are you still there?" "I am," Marion Locke said. Her voice was sharp, energized. "File the protective motions." I said, "Freeze the trust distributions. Lock the holding company accounts. If they try to buy a gallon of milk with Griffin money today, I want the card to decline. Consider it done." Marion said, "And Ariana?" "Yes?" "Lock your doors. They are desperate. And desperate people make mistakes." I hung up. I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt a cold, mechanical precision. For 7 years, they had operated on the assumption that I was emotional, fragile, and chaotic. They had built their entire strategy on my expected instability. But I wasn't unstable. I was just informed. The counterattack began 48 hours later. They didn't come to the house. They didn't call my phone. They went for the one thing I had built without them. I was working in the study at Hawthorne Court when my cell phone buzzed. It was Sarah, the project lead at Bright Harbor, the nonprofit platform I had been freelancing for. Ariana, Sarah said. Her tone was stiff. We need to talk. My stomach tightened. Is something wrong with the copy? No, but we received a disturbing phone call this morning. From a Philip Griffin. He identified himself as a senior advisor on our community board. I closed my eyes. Of course. He expressed concern about your current capacity, Sarah continued, choosing her words carefully. He suggested that you are currently going through a severe manic episode and that you might be using your access to our system to gather data for a personal vendetta. He strongly recommended we suspend your contract for your own safety. I sat very still. They were trying to starve me out, if they cut off my income. They thought I would have to come crawling back to them for the settlement money. They were painting me as the crazy girl again, weaponizing my professional relationships. Sarah, I said, keeping my voice steady, did he provide any proof of this episode? He said the family is handling a private crisis and that you are lashing out. He mentioned you might be sending erratic emails. I haven't sent any emails. Sarah, I submitted my deliverables yesterday. They were clean, on time, and under budget. I know, Sarah said, but he is a board member. Ariana, we have to take these allegations seriously. If there is a risk of data liability, I made a decision then. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to apologize. I am going to send you a document. Sarah, it is a PDF. It is a notarized affidavit regarding the ownership of Griffin Orchard Holdings. What does that have to do with this? Everything. Please. Just read it. I hung up and forwarded the file Marion had prepared. The summary of the will that named me the majority owner of the company that Philip worked for. I also attached the interference letter, the one Philip had sent to the Chicago firm 7 years ago, proving a pattern of sabotaging my employment. 10 minutes later, Sarah called back. Ariana, she said. The tone was completely different. Yes, I am looking at this document. It says you are the managing member of the entity that Philip Griffin represents? That is correct. I said, my uncle is currently facing an internal audit for financial misappropriation. He is attempting to discredit me to leverage a settlement. I apologize that he dragged Bright Harbor into a family legal dispute. It is unprofessional, and I will be dealing with it internally. There was a long silence. I see, Sarah said finally. Well, that changes the context significantly. I will have my contract deliverables to you by Friday. Sarah, unless you would prefer to terminate? No, Sarah said quickly. No, that won't be necessary. We value your work. Ariana? And good luck with the audit. I lowered the phone. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of a bullet dodged. They had tried to use their status to crush me, but they forgot that their status was borrowed. It belonged to the company, and the company belonged to me. I went back to the files. I needed to understand the root. Why 7 years ago? I knew they were greedy. I knew they used me to hide their theft. But the timing of my breakdown 7 years ago had always felt too precise. I had been 26, just starting to gain traction in my career. Why did they strike then? I found the answer in a folder of scanned emails from Lorraine's personal account. It was an email dated 2 weeks before my career imploded. From Lorraine Griffin to Marion Locke. Subject, succession planning. Marion. I have been watching the children. Philip is too greedy. Ellen is too passive. Denise is too chaotic. I am worried about the legacy. I am thinking of bringing Ariana in. She has a head for strategy. She is young, but she is the only one who doesn't look at me and see a dollar sign. I want to rewrite the trust to give her a seat on the board next year. Let us draft a proposal. I stared at the screen. Lorraine had told them, or she had hinted at it. She must have mentioned it at dinner. Or maybe Philip saw a draft lying on her desk. I am thinking of bringing Ariana in. That was the trigger. They didn't destroy me because I was weak. They destroyed me because I was a threat. They saw me rising. They saw Lorraine turning toward me. And they realized that if I got a foothold in the company, their free ride was over. So they executed a preemptive strike. They engineered a public failure so spectacular, so humiliating, that Lorraine would be forced to back off. They made me unfit so they could stay in power. I wasn't a victim of circumstance. I was a victim of a coup. I walked out to the garden. The rain had stopped, leaving the air smelling of wet earth and pine. I stood by the old stone fountain, looking at the water. I had the power to burn them down. I had the evidence of credit card fraud for my mother. I had the evidence of embezzlement for Philip. I had the tax evasion proof for Denise. I could call the district attorney. I could hand over the files. They would go to prison, or at least, they would be tied up in felony trials for the next 5 years. Their reputations would be ash. It would be justice. But then I thought about the next 5 years of my life. If I went to war, I would be the daughter who jailed her mother. I would be the niece who sued her family. I would spend every day in courtrooms, giving depositions, reliving the trauma. I would be defined by them forever. I didn't want my future to be about punishing them. I wanted my future to be about me. I wanted to be free. I went back inside and called Marion. "Draft the final settlement," I said. "The scorched earth version?" Marion asked. "No," I said. "The surgical version." 2 days later, the family was summoned to the conference room at Loch Fenner. They all came. They looked exhausted. My mother wore sunglasses indoors. Philip looked like he hadn't slept in a week. I sat at the head of the table. Marion sat to my right. Devon sat to my left. "We have a final offer," I said. "There is no negotiation. You sign it, or I release the transparency packet to the IRS and the district attorney's office at 5 o'clock today." I slid the documents across the table. "What is this?" Philip asked, picking up the thick stack. "Section 1, I said. "Restitution. You will repay the $412,000 you siphoned from the company over the last 7 years. You have 12 months. You will sign a cognate note, meaning if you miss a payment, judgment is entered immediately. We don't have that kind of cash liquid." Denise protested. "Then sell your assets," I said coldly. "Sell the boat." Philip, "Sell the vacation condo." Denise, "I don't care how you find the money, but you will pay back the company." Section 2. I continued. Resignations. You will all resign from the board of Griffin Orchard Holdings effective immediately. You will also resign from any charitable board or community organization where you used my name or my illness to gain position. My mother looked up. That is social suicide. It is a correction of the record," I said. "And you will write letters to those organizations stating that you are stepping down for personal reasons and that any previous statements regarding Ariana Griffin were misinformed." And finally, I said, Section 3, the narrative. I pointed to the last page. "You will sign a non-disparagement agreement. You will never speak about my mental health, my finances, or my history to anyone, ever again. If I hear a whisper, if a neighbor tells me you sighed and said I was struggling, I trigger the penalty clause. $10,000 per infraction." Philip stared at the paper. "This is humiliated. You are stripping us of everything. I am leaving you your freedom." "Philip," I said, "which is more than you deserve." He looked at me with hate, but underneath the hate, there was respect. For the first time, he wasn't looking at a charity case. He was looking at a CEO. "I am not signing this," Shelby said, slamming the paper down. "It is unfair. I have a reputation." "Then don't sign." I said, "Devon, prepare the file for the IRS. I think they will be very interested in the tax implications of the resilience grant money you used for your patio." Shelby froze. They signed, one by one. The pens scratched against the paper. My mother signed last. She didn't look at me. She just signed her name. Ellen Griffin, and slid the paper back. "It is done," Marion said, gathering the documents. "Get out," I said. They stood up. They gathered their coats. They walked out of the conference room without a word. I sat there for a long time, listening to the silence. It didn't feel like a party. It felt like a fever breaking. Ariana, Marion said gently, there is one more thing. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small digital recorder. Lorraine left this for you, she said. She told me to give it to you only when the ink was dry. I took the recorder. My hands were trembling. I walked to the window, looking out at the harbor. I pressed play. There was a hiss of static, and then her voice, clear, sharp, and unmistakably Lorraine. Ariana, honey, if you are listening to this, it means you won. I knew you would. I closed my eyes, letting the tears finally fall. I know they made you feel small. Lorraine's voice continued. I know they told you that you were broken, but I want you to know why I chose you. It wasn't because I pitied you. It was because you were the only one who ever looked at me and saw a grandmother, not a bank vault. I laughed, a wet, choking sound. Philip thinks power is about controlling people, she said. Ellen thinks it is about appearances, but you survived them. You took every hit, and you kept your dignity. That is real power. Ariana, that is the kind of steel that can run this family. Do not let them change you. You are the Griffin legacy now. Make it something good. I love you. Honey, now, go get some rest. You have work to do. The recording clicked off. I stood by the window for a long time, holding the plastic device against my chest. I wasn't broken. I had never been broken. I was just tempered. The fallout was quieter than I expected, but also stranger. With the immediate family silenced by the agreement, the rumors stopped. But the vacuum was filled by something else. About a month after the settlement, I received a letter from a cousin in Ohio, someone I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. Dear Ariana, I heard about the changes in the trust. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry I didn't reach out sooner. We were all told you were unwell and that we shouldn't disturb you. It is easier to believe the story than to ask questions. I guess. I hope you are doing okay. It was a small thing, but it was a start. I realized that the charity case label hadn't just isolated me, it had given everyone else permission to be lazy. It was easier to pity me than to engage with me. Now that the label was gone, they had to deal with me as a person. I kept Hawthorne Court. I didn't sell it. I moved in properly. I painted the dining room a deep, rich green, no more beige. I turned the sunroom into my office. I hired a new management team for Griffin Orchard Holdings. I fired the consultants Philip had on the payroll and hired actual experts. We started reinvesting the profits into the properties instead of siphoning them off. I didn't invite the family for Christmas. I spent Christmas morning drinking coffee in my sunroom, watching the snow fall on the rose garden. It was quiet. It was solitary. But it wasn't lonely. Loneliness is being in a room full of people who refuse to see you. Solitude is being alone with yourself and liking the company. I still saw them around town sometimes. I saw my mother at the grocery store. We nodded, polite and distant, like strangers who shared a dentist. I saw Shelby at a stoplight. She looked away quickly. They were ghosts now. They existed in the periphery of my life, fading a little more every day. I had rebuilt, not the life I had 7 years ago. That innocent, trusting girl was gone. But I had built something stronger. I was no longer the girl they whispered about. I was the woman who signed the checks. I walked through the house, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. I stopped in the hallway. Looking at the portrait of Lorraine that hung by the stairs, I touched the frame. We did it. Grandma, I whispered. I walked out the front door, locking it behind me with the heavy brass key. I had a meeting with the tenants at the logistics center. I had a business to run. The charity case was closed. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey into the dark heart of a family that chose reputation over love. And I hope you enjoyed Ariana's fight for the truth. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the channel Revenge Stories. We have many more tales of justice, betrayal, and the long road to redemption coming your way. And please, share your thoughts on Ariana's choice in the comments. Did she do the right thing by letting them go? Or should she have destroyed them completely? I can't wait to read your opinions. Until next time, stay safe. And remember, the truth always leaves a paper trail.